On the 1094th day, after I got a second chance at life, my husband signed our divorce papers, looked up, and casually asked, "Is there dessert tonight?" I smiled and told him the lemon pie was on the second shelf of the fridge. What I didn't tell him was that starting tomorrow, no one would be there to run his perfect little life for him. They all thought I'd come crawling back. 3 days later, the entire Whitmore household was falling apart. Welcome to revenge cookies. For 20 years, she ran his house, raised his son, absorbed his family's contempt, and took the blame for a crime she didn't commit. On day 1094 of her second chance at life, he signed the divorce papers and asked if there was dessert. She smiled and told him where to find the pie. What she didn't mention was that starting tomorrow, no one would be there to run his perfect little world for him. On the 1094th day after I got a second chance at life, my husband signed our divorce papers, looked up, and asked, "Is there dessert?" The silver pen was still resting on the last page. The ink hadn't even dried. I pulled the papers back, stacked them neatly, and said, "Yes, lemon pie. Second shelf of the fridge." Grant Whitmore stared at me for 2 seconds, as if my perfectly normal answer had thrown him off, more than the divorce itself. He had just gotten home from the office. His tie was loosened by 1 notch. His phone sat beside his hand, and the screen lit up every 30 seconds with another message. At the other end of the dining table, Eleanor tapped her spoon against the rim of her china bowl. "Danielle, is this soup saltier than last week's?" I took a sip. Maybe the chef got heavy-handed. "You used to taste everything before it came to the table. From now on, the chef can taste his own food." That finally made her look up. Ethan looked up too. He had a foundation event the next morning, and his suit jacket was draped over the back of his chair. "Danielle, where are my cufflinks?" "Second drawer on the left in your bedroom. Which compartment? Open it. You'll see them." He frowned as if I'd just introduced a new level of difficulty into his life. Right then, a message from Noah popped up on my phone. "Mom, did you move my flight back to school to the afternoon on Sunday?" I looked at it and replied for the last time. "The confirmation is in your email. Save it yourself from now on." He sent back a question mark almost immediately. I turned my phone face down on the table. Grant picked up the divorce papers and flipped back to the first page. "You are serious? You asked me that before you signed. I thought you were angry, and you signed anyway." His jaw tightened. He didn't argue. I slid the papers into a manila envelope, sealed it, and set it aside. Candlelight caught on the wedding band on Grant's left hand. 20 years ago, I thought that ring was a doorway. I believed that once I stepped through it, I would finally have a family of my own. 20 years later, it looked exactly like what it was, a circle of metal. Eleanor put down her spoon. "What did you just say about signing something?" Grant looked at her. "Danielle wants a divorce." The dining room went silent for 3 full seconds. Then Ethan laughed. Again, I turned to him. He was leaning back in his chair, almost relaxed. "The last time you and Dad fought, you packed a suitcase too. The next morning, you still planned Grandma's birthday dinner. That was 7 years ago. So your memory works just fine." He didn't hear what was underneath the words. He just picked up his water. Eleanor kept staring at me. "Danielle, the house has been hectic lately. Grant's under pressure. You are both adults. Don't use divorce as a threat." "I am not threatening anyone." "You've been married to Grant for 20 years, exactly. I know what I am doing." Grant's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and stood. "It is work." He walked toward the dining room door, then stopped and looked back at me. "I've signed the papers. If you need a few days to cool off, take them." "Okay, I'll have my attorney contact you Monday." A faint crease appeared between his brows. He had always liked that word from me. Okay. No arguing. No questions. No emotional mess for him to deal with after a long day. I'd given him that answer for years. He turned away to take the call. Eleanor tossed her napkin onto the table. "I've lost my appetite." She stood, then paused. "Remind me at 9:30 tomorrow. I have a video appointment with Dr. Harris at 10. It is already written on the kitchen calendar. You won't be here tomorrow." "Number, where are you going? I have things to do." She looked ready to press me, but Ethan was already heading upstairs with his jacket. "Danielle, if I can't find those cufflinks, I seriously don't have time tomorrow morning. then find them tonight." His steps stopped. "What is wrong with you?" I smiled. It was the last dinner I ever made in the Whitmore house. At 10 that night, I checked the kitchen one final time. I turned off the coffee machine, canceled the automatic grocery deliveries, and removed my name from every household spending card linked to my accounts. At 11, I sealed the last moving box. The amount of stuff I wanted to take was almost funny. 20 years of marriage, and my life fit into 6 boxes. 3 boxes of clothes, 2 of books, 1 with old photographs, and the ceramic vase my mother had left me. I didn't touch the jewelry cabinet. Everything Grant had given me stayed where it was. At 1 in the morning, he opened the bedroom door. He saw the boxes lined against the wall and finally stopped moving. "You are really leaving? Tomorrow morning. Where are you going?" "I haven't decided whether I want you to know." He yanked off his tie and stared at me. "Danielle, I've been in meetings since 7 this morning. I don't have the energy for games." "Then don't play one." I opened the vanity drawer and slipped off my wedding ring. It rolled once inside the wooden box and tapped softly against the edge. Grant's eyes followed it. "What are you even angry about?" I looked up. "You really don't know. If I knew, I wouldn't be asking." I nodded once. "Right." Then I closed the drawer. That is all I needed to know. He stood there without moving. I walked past him and spent my last night in the guest room. The next morning, I got up at 6:30 like always. I didn't make coffee. I didn't make breakfast. There was 1 sheet of paper on the refrigerator. Eleanor's doctor's appointment, Ethan's event address, Noah's flight confirmation number, the envelope Grant needed to bring to his attorney on Monday. I placed my house key on top of the list. Then I wheeled my luggage out the front door. The sprinklers had just come on, and the grass glistened in the early light. I loaded the boxes into my car without looking back. Before I left the neighborhood, I pulled over for maybe 15 seconds. There was a hidden album on my phone. It held only 3 pictures. 1 was a hospital ceiling. 1 was a screenshot of a date. The 3rd was a number I'd typed into my calendar, the day I opened my eyes again 3 years earlier. 10:95. I looked at it for a moment, then I deleted it. The countdown was over. 2 hours later, Grant called me for the first time. The call didn't go through. He tried again. Same automated message. By the 3rd attempt, he finally realized the number I'd used for 19 years had been disconnected. By then, I was already heading south on the interstate. The Whitmore house had disappeared from my rearview mirror a long time ago. On the first day after I left, the Whitmore coffee machine broke. Technically, it was fine. Grant just pressed the wrong button 3 times. Noah told me about that later. He had video called home from school because he wanted to know where his passport was. And he happened to catch his father standing in the kitchen in a dress shirt, glaring at the coffee machine. "Dad, what are you doing? Making coffee." Number that is the cleaning cycle. Grant's face hardened immediately. Noah laughed for about 2 seconds before remembering why he'd called. "Right, where's my passport? Ask your mother. Her number doesn't work." Grant froze. "You called her too." "Obviously. I am going back to school this weekend." "Why don't you have your own passport?" That question stopped Noah cold. For 19 years, whenever he needed the thing, it simply appeared on his desk. He had never once wondered where it lived the rest of the time. Eventually, they found it on the second shelf of the fireproof cabinet in the study. Next to it was a clear folder with a label in my handwriting. Noah. Passport T phoned birth certificate. Certificate insurance. Noah stared at it for a long time. Grant handed him the folder. "Keep track of it yourself from now on." The words sounded familiar. I'd said the same thing 3 days earlier. The next day, it was Eleanor's turn. Her video appointment was at 10. She remembered at 10:20, when the doctor's office called and she was still upstairs choosing earrings. When she came down, the first thing she said was, "Why didn't Danielle remind me?" The housekeeper stood beside the kitchen island. "Ma'am, it is on the calendar." Eleanor turned. Right in the middle of the whiteboard, in black marker, was a neat reminder, Tuesday, 10 o'clock. Eleanor sued Dr. Harris under it. I'd drawn an arrow. "Set a phone reminder yourself." That second line might as well have been waiting there just for her. She snapped the cap back onto the marker so hard it cracked against the board. On the 3rd day, Ethan called Grant 6 times from backstage at the foundation event. Grant didn't answer once. So Ethan tried my old number. Of course, that didn't work either. He was standing backstage with mismatched cufflinks, his speech sitting on a desk at home, and the thank you gifts for the event sponsors still on a shelf in the garage. His assistant said, "Mr. Whitmore, your grandmother told us." Miss Bennett finalized the dinner seating. "We need the final version." Ethan stared at her. "She didn't send it to you." "She left the planning group 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks ago? Yes. That was when his face finally changed. I hadn't thrown clothes into boxes on a whim. For 3 weeks, I'd been quietly removing myself from every part of the Whitmore household. Friday night was Eleanor's annual charity luncheon. I used to hate that day more than any other date on the calendar. More than 20 guests. 6 dietary restrictions. 2 old friends who couldn't be seated together. 1 woman allergic to lilies. 1 elderly guest who always arrived 40 minutes early. Eleanor's only job had ever been to come downstairs. This year, she did exactly that. And stopped halfway down the staircase. 8 enormous arrangements of lilies filled the dining room. The guest with the allergy had already arrived. Across the room, 2 women who hadn't spoken in a decade had been seated at the same table. The event manager looked ready to faint. Eleanor held on to her smile, turned, and walked into the hallway. Grant answered her call. "Where is Danielle?" "I don't know." "How can you not know?" "Because she left." "I know she left," Eleanor hissed. "I am asking where she is now." Grant went quiet, so did she. Finally, Eleanor asked, "When is she coming back?" "She said she isn't. She'll come back. She always does." "Mom." Grant's voice dropped. She disconnected her number. There was a long silence on the other end. The luncheon still happened. Nothing truly disastrous occurred, but for the first time in her life, Eleanor barely spoke at her own table. That night, Grant asked his assistant to check my credit card activity. Nothing. The household accounts. I'd removed myself 3 weeks earlier. Airline miles. I'd opened a new account under my own name. My car, registered under my maiden name. The next day, he finally had his attorney contact mine. My attorney sent back exactly 1 sentence. "Miss Bennett has authorized our office to handle all communication regarding marital assets. Please do not attempt to pressure her through private channels. Miss Bennett, not Mrs. Whitmore." Grant stared at that email for more than 10 seconds. Then he called his assistant. "Find her." His assistant hesitated. "How? Legally." "Understood." Grant paused. "Yes." "Don't let her know it came from me." 3 days later, he was standing in the doorway of my flower shop. I was in the backyard fighting a faucet. The old outdoor spigot had started leaking. I turned it the wrong way, and a stream of water blasted me square in the face. A man leaning against the fence laughed out loud. "You might want to shut off the main valve first." I wiped water from my eyes. I'd have appreciated that advice about 60 seconds ago. "I assumed you knew." "I do now." His name was Daniel Reed. He ran the little inn next door and happened to co-own the retail building my shop was in. He shut off the water for me. I asked, "How much do I owe you?" Daniel looked at me. "I am not a plumber. So you are more expensive." That made him laugh harder. Before I could even wring out my hair, the bell over the front door chimed. Grant was standing there. White shirt, dark slacks, cuffs buttoned perfectly. He looked completely wrong in a little flower shop with the door propped open and water on the floor. Daniel looked at him, then at me. Friend. Potential ex-husband. Grant's expression tightened instantly. Daniel got the message. "I'll go find a wrench." After he left, Grant's eyes dropped to my soaked shirt. "You live here, nearby. Come home with me." I picked up a towel and started wiping down the counter. "Why?" "The house is a disaster." I stopped. "And, Danielle?" "Grant, do you want your wife back, or do you want your unpaid household manager back?" His face went cold. "That is not what I meant. Your first sentence was that the house is a disaster. Because it is. Then deal with it. It is your house." I wrung out the towel and hung it over the back of a chair. "It is not mine." He stared at me. 20 years, and now you are saying it was never your home. Your family's paperwork is more honest than you are. I went behind the counter, opened a drawer, and pulled out a copy of the Whitmore Family Trust. Eleanor, Grant, Ethan, Noah, Grant's sister. Even Meredith had a long-term financial provision from her divorce. My name did not appear once. Grant looked down at the pages. This matters to you. What matters is that every one of you called me family. I tapped the list. But whenever something required an actual signature, I wasn't. You don't understand corporate management. Neither does Meredith. He went silent. Your sister's husband doesn't either. His expression darkened by degrees. If this is what you want, I can change it. Number, why not? I looked him straight in the eye, because I am not negotiating for a better seat at your table. Outside, Daniel came back, carrying a toolbox. His steps slowed when he heard us. I didn't look away from Grant. I am telling you the truth. The family you kept insisting was mine never made room for me. Grant's fingers tightened around the papers. What happened to you? I took the pages back from his hand. It happened 21 years ago. I slid them into the drawer. You are just asking the question for the first time today. Grant didn't go straight home after leaving the shop. Meredith told me later that he sat in his car for almost an hour. I never asked how she knew. Mostly because Meredith herself walked into my shop the next morning. She wore oversized sunglasses and carried 2 cups of coffee. I am guessing you weren't planning to invite me to sit down. Good guess. So I brought my own coffee. She slid 1 cup across the counter. Oat milk, no sugar. Is that still how you take it? I glanced at the cup. It wasn't 20 years ago. I know. She took off her sunglasses. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. Grant asked me about the emails from 21 years ago. The pruning shears stopped halfway through a rose stem. I looked up. Finally. Yay. That was quick. She didn't smile. Danielle, I need to ask too. Ask what? Did you do it? I clipped away a yellowing leaf. Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Did you tell us that back then? Yes. Who? You once. Grant 3 times. Eleanor twice. Her lips parted. I placed the rose in a vase. The first time was in the foundation office. You threw a printout of the emails onto my desk. I told you I hadn't logged into your account. Meredith's face lost some color. The second time, Grant confronted me in the parking lot. I told him I'd hand over my computer to anyone he wanted. I reached for another stem. The third time, he decided I had to leave the foundation. I went to his office. He told me that if I had any dignity left, I should stop wasting his time with lies. Meredith lowered her eyes. Danielle. The 4th time was after Grant and I were married. The shears touched the glass vase with a sharp little click. Ethan tore down a family photo wall I'd spent a week putting together. He said, I had no right to put myself in a Whitmore family picture. Meredith closed her eyes briefly. Was Grant there? Yes. What did he say? He said Ethan was young. Ethan was 10. I know. The shop went quiet. Meredith pulled the coffee toward herself, then pushed it back toward me again. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. I owe you an apology. You do, she blinked. I finally met her eyes. So you can give me one. Meredith stared at me for 2 seconds. Her eyes slowly filled. I am sorry. I nodded. Accepted. She looked almost confused that it ended there. You are not going to yell at me. I have a bridal bouquet due at 11. A laugh escaped her, and a tear went with it. You are still so. She stopped herself. So what? Never mind. The bell over the door jingled. Daniel walked in and set a repaired brass faucet piece on the counter. Meredith looked at him. He looked at her. Should I come back later? You should have come back yesterday. That is my thank. You? You can have half my coffee. Meredith immediately pulled her cup closer. Not this one. Daniel lifted both hands. Crystal clear. The exchange was pointless, which was probably why it helped. Some of the tension finally left Meredith's shoulders. Before she left, she stopped at the door. Grant's digging through old records. He can dig. He might find something. Good. You are not scared. I put a roll of twine back in the drawer. Of what? She studied me. That the truth is coming too late. I smiled faintly. It already did. That afternoon, Ethan started looking too. Not for me. He was overseeing a digital archive migration for the foundation. which gave him access to old server retention records. Normally, login data from 21 years earlier would have been long gone. But the Foundation had once gone through an insurance audit, and a third-party company had preserved part of the system backup. When Ethan got the first set of records, he called Grant. Danielle wasn't even in the building that night. There was no answer on the other end. Ethan kept going. Her account was accessed at 10:14 p.m. Parking records show she left at 9:40. Could she have logged in remotely? Not back then. The system didn't have remote access. Another silence. There is more, Ethan said. The login didn't come from her computer. Which terminal? Public relations. Grant came to see me again 3 days later. The shop was busy that afternoon. I was showing sample flowers to a middle-aged couple planning a small wedding. The woman held up a cream-colored rose. Is this too plain? Her fiancé shook his head. If you love it, it isn't plain. I looked down to note the quantity. The bell over the door chimed. Grant came in and, for once, didn't interrupt. He stood by the wall and waited 20 minutes. Only after I walked the couple out did I go over to him. You seem to have a lot of free time lately. I found the login records. Congratulations, Danielle. His throat moved. Did you really tell me back then? Would it make you feel better if I said no? He didn't answer. I walked past him and dumped cut stems into the trash. The first time, you told me not to treat Meredith like an idiot. His fingers curled slightly. The second time, you said the evidence was obvious and that every excuse only made me look worse. The color slowly drained from his face. The third time, I stopped. He looked up. What happened the third time? We'd been married 6 months. A car passed outside, and sunlight flashed across the shop window. I asked you if, one day, you found out I hadn't done it, whether you'd think you owed me an apology. Grant's lips moved. I held his gaze. You said, Danielle, stop bringing this up. We're married now. You need to move on. His breathing hitched. I said that. You did. I don't remember. I do. The only sound in the shop was the low hum of the flower cooler. Grant pressed a hand to his forehead. Why didn't you bring it up again all these years? I picked up a spray bottle and misted the hydrangeas near the window. Because after the 4th time, I understood the answer. What answer? Water rolled down the edge of a leaf. I set the bottle down. You weren't unable to understand me. I looked at him. You didn't want to believe me. For the first time in as long as I could remember, his shoulders didn't look quite so straight. I went to the door and opened it. I am closing. Danielle, anything else? If the records prove you were innocent, I'll fix this. Publicly, completely. I laughed softly. Grant, you still don't get it. He looked at me. I don't need you to prove I am innocent anymore. Why? Because I don't live in your courtroom now. He didn't move. I opened the door wider. You are investigating this for yourself, not for me. He finally stepped outside. I was about to close the door when he turned back. Are you going to the Foundation anniversary gala next week? Yes. Why? I am doing the flowers. His expression shifted. You took a Whitmore Foundation contract. Open bid. My price was competitive. You know we'll all be there. I do. And you still took it. I held the door halfway closed. Grant, leaving you doesn't mean I am going to spend the rest of my life avoiding anything with the name Whitmore on it. After he left, I locked up. A message from Meredith came through almost immediately. It was a photo of another old record. A list of authorized users for the public relations terminal. The first name on it was one I knew very well. Eleanor Whitmore, the day of the Foundation anniversary gala. I arrived at 3 in the afternoon. The tables had just been dressed, and half the ballroom lights were still off. I rolled in 2 carts of flowers with a pair of part-time assistants. The venue manager hurried over. Miss Bennett, Mrs. Whitmore is backstage. I handed a bundle of white delphiniums to one of my assistants. Which Mrs. Whitmore? The manager froze. I smiled. Kidding. Eleanor came down from the 2nd floor while I was adjusting the centerpiece at the head table. She was dressed formally, every detail in place, pearl earrings perfectly still. Danielle. I kept working. Don't touch the arrangement on the left. I just secured it. She actually stopped. Years ago. She would never have stopped because I told her to. How have you been? Good. Grant said this place. She looked around the ballroom. It looks very nice. Thank you. You've lost weight. I've been carrying a lot of flower boxes. Her lips pressed together. Danielle, can we talk? Not now. Doors open at 6, and I still have 37 tables. She stood there for a few seconds. After the gala. We'll see. When she walked away, I went back to work. Meredith arrived at 5:10. Ethan at 5:25. Grant didn't show up until 5:40. None of the three looked much like they were there to celebrate. I set the last flower in place and stepped back to check the arrangement. Grant walked toward me. We need to talk. Again. Danielle, your family really loves that sentence lately. Meredith almost laughed. Grant glanced at her. She raised both hands. Don't look at me. I am on team evidence now. Ethan said nothing. He held out a folder to Grant. Grant didn't take it. He looked directly at Eleanor instead. Mom, 21 years ago. Why did you have temporary authorization for the PR terminal? The color vanished from Eleanor's face. She looked at Grant, then at me. This is not the place for this conversation. Meredith folded her arms. Funny, 21 years ago. Everyone thought the foundation office was a great place to discuss my private emails. Meredith, don't. Ethan finally spoke. Grandma, I found the third-party backup. Eleanor's fingers tightened around her clutch. Before the emails were sent, an external storage device was plugged into that computer. The device was registered to Richard Vale, a PR consultant. Eleanor closed her eyes. I stood beside the flower cart and said nothing. Grant stared at his mother. You knew him. Of course I knew him. He worked for the family. Who told him to access Meredith's email? Grant. This was 21 years ago. Who? Eleanor's head snapped up. I never told him to leak anything. The entire backstage area went silent. She realized what she'd said at the same time everyone else did. Meredith gave a slow, humorless smile. Well, that saves us half an hour. Eleanor's lips began to tremble. I only asked him to confirm what was in the emails. At the time, I was afraid you and Grant might reconcile, and everything would fall apart again. You'd written terrible things about the Whitmores. I wanted to know how you really felt. Grant's voice turned flat and cold. And then, Richard copied the files. He later admitted someone on the team mistakenly included the attachment in a media packet. When did you know? Eleanor said nothing. Ethan's breathing grew heavier. Grandma. At last she said, before Grant married Danielle. Grant went completely still. Meredith inhaled sharply. I set the pruning shears down, a tiny click. Grant turned to me. You knew. I didn't know when she found out. But you knew you hadn't done it. Of course I did. Then why didn't you? He stopped mid-sentence. I looked at him. Why didn't I explain? He said nothing. I picked up the shears and trimmed a stem that was too long. Snip. I did. Snip. Snip. 3 times. Grant's face had gone almost gray. Eleanor stepped toward me. Danielle, back then It is 6. I checked my watch. Guests are coming in. She stared at me. You don't want to hear my explanation. You had 21 years. I handed the shears to my assistant. Right now, I am working. Voices were already drifting in from the lobby. Eleanor stood frozen in place. Behind her, an entire mirrored wall reflected every face in the room with brutal clarity. The gala started on time. I didn't sit at the Whitmore table. When my work was finished, Daniel and I ate cold pasta in the staff area. He'd volunteered to help move flower stands that afternoon. He twirled a forkful and nodded toward the ballroom. The guy in the gray suit keeps staring at you. Which guy? The one who looks like he is considering firing the whole building. My husband. Daniel nearly choked. I thought you said potential ex. Husband. Paperwork isn't final yet. Then I take back what I was about to say. What were you about to say? That he looks like a man who wants you back. I took a sip of water. Your instincts need work. Plumbing is more my area. I laughed. Across the ballroom. Grant saw me. He didn't come over. It wasn't until most of the guests had left that Ethan found me. He wasn't holding a drink. His face was flushed. Whether from the heat or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. Danielle? Yeah. When I was a kid, all those things I did. He stopped. I waited. His hands went into his pockets, then came right back out. I always thought you destroyed my parents' marriage. I know. That is what everyone said. I know that too. Then why did you still cook for you, go to school conferences? Remember that you were allergic to nuts. His mouth moved faintly. Yeah, because you were a child. But I grew up. I didn't answer. His eyes reddened. He looked down at the carpet. Last year, in that interview, I said, you were just the woman Dad married later. I saw it. Why didn't you say anything? What was I supposed to say? Yell at me? Call me out? Anything. I dropped my empty water cup into the recycling bin. You are an adult now. It is not my job to teach you how to treat people. He stood there with nothing left to say. I walked past him. Grant was waiting by the exit. Eleanor was gone. Meredith leaned against the wall on the other side. When she saw me coming, she only tipped her chin. Grant spoke first. Mom admitted it. I heard. She is willing to issue a public correction. That is her decision. I will too. Also your decision. His brow tightened. Danielle, what do you want? I stopped. A divorce. Besides the divorce. Nothing. Money? A trust interest? Property? Meredith rolled her eyes from the wall. I laughed. Grant's expression darkened. What is funny? 1 year later you are finally willing to give me something. I looked at him. The problem is, what I want now is for you to stop offering. His breathing grew heavier. Danielle, anything else? A voice came from behind me. Mom. I turned. Noah had somehow made it back from school. A backpack hung from one shoulder, and his hair looked like he'd spent the whole trip running his hands through it. He came straight toward me, eyes flicking from Grant back to me. I asked Dad. He wouldn't tell me. Tell you what? Noah pulled out his phone. On the screen was an old calendar screenshot he'd found in the cloud backup from my previous computer. There was only one number on it, 1095. What does this mean? I didn't answer immediately. His hand started shaking. Mom, why were you counting down every day for 3 years? When Noah held the phone out to me, I noticed a thin crack across the screen. He must have been gripping it too hard the whole way there. I gently pushed the phone down. This isn't the place to talk about it. Grant answered immediately. Then let's go home. I looked at him. Not that home. We ended up at a nearby coffee shop that had already closed for the night. The owner knew Daniel and let us use the long table in the back. Eleanor didn't come. Neither did Meredith. Just Grant, Ethan, Noah, and me. Noah sat across from me, both hands wrapped around his phone. What is 1095? I poured myself a glass of warm water. 3 years, I know that. His voice rose. I am asking why 3 years. I watched him for a few seconds. Because 3 years ago, I almost didn't wake up. Grant's shoulders snapped tight. What? I didn't look at him. In my first life, the last hospital room I ever saw didn't have a window. The fluorescent lights stayed on all night. There was tape across the back of my hand from the IV. And every breath felt like my chest had been packed with wet cotton. A nurse set my phone beside me. There were 17 unread messages. 2 from Grant. Meeting ran late. I'll come after. What did the doctor say? 3 from Eleanor, asking where I'd saved the dinner menu for an upcoming event. 1 from Ethan, asking whether I'd mailed the gift he needed to send. 11 from Noah. The last one said, Mom, where is my passport? I need it tomorrow. I lay there with barely enough strength to unlock my phone. I didn't cry. I just stared at that message for a long time. Then the lights seemed to get brighter. The sounds around me drifted farther away. And when I opened my eyes again, I was standing in the Whitmore kitchen. The coffee machine was dripping out the last drop of coffee. The date on my phone was 3 years earlier. Noah was 17. He had 1 more year before graduating high school, and he couldn't do anything for himself. He didn't know how to deal with his insurance. He didn't know the name of our family doctor. He didn't know where his passport was kept. If 1 page was missing from a college application, he would knock on my door in the middle of the night. I picked up my phone and typed 1 number into my calendar. 1095. Noah's face slowly went pale. So I gave you 3 years. You gave me 3 years. I reached across the table, took his phone, and opened his notes app. He had his own bank account now, his own insurance login, his doctor's information, his school finance portal. a folder with all of his personal documents. I'd taught him every piece of it, one by one. Noah stared at the screen. A tear dropped onto the back of his hand. I thought you just decided I needed to grow up. That too. You were getting me ready so you could leave me. My hand stopped for a moment. I was getting myself ready to leave a place that wasn't right for me. What about me? He looked up, eyes red. Was I part of that place too? The refrigerator in the coffee shop kitchen suddenly kicked on with a low hum. I looked at him. You are my son. Then why did you leave without saying anything? Because if I'd told you first, you would have asked me to stay. His chin trembled. I would have, I know. Then why didn't you stay for me? Grant's head came up sharply. Ethan turned toward the window. I took the crumpled napkin in front of Noah, unfolded it, and smoothed it flat against the table. Because I already stayed 3 years for you. Noah dropped his head. His shoulders shook once, then again. I didn't get up to hug him. After a long time, he stood on his own and came around the table. Can I hug you? I looked up. It was the first time he'd ever asked. I nodded. Noah bent down and wrapped his arms around me. He was much taller than I was now, but he held me carefully, as if he was afraid I might break. I am sorry. His voice was muffled against my shoulder. At the hospital. In that first life, did I really only ask about my passport? I closed my eyes for 1 second. Yes. His arms tightened. Grant stood so suddenly that his chair scraped hard across the floor. He walked to the glass door and turned his back to us. One hand braced against the pane. Ethan looked at his father, then at me. So you really died once? Yes, he didn't ask anything else. It was a long time before Grant turned around. I didn't go to the hospital. I looked at him. You did. For half a second, relief passed over his face. The next morning, the relief vanished. By then, the nurse had already packed my things into a bag. Grant's hand slid down from the glass. No one spoke. I checked the time. It is late. Grant spoke suddenly. Danielle, don't go. Noah slowly let go of me. I picked up my bag. The attorneys will send the asset list next week. I am not talking about that. Then what are you talking about? Grant came closer. His collar was slightly crooked now. Even his hair looked less controlled than usual. Give me some time. You had 20 years. I know now. Know what? That I was wrong. I held his gaze. About which part? Grant opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I smiled faintly. See? His face went white. You still don't even know where to start. I walked out of the coffee shop. The following week, the formal divorce negotiations began. The Whitmore legal team arrived with 3 thick binders. My attorney brought a tablet and 1 slim folder. Grant offered me a downtown apartment. I declined. He offered me a share of the family trust. I declined that too. Then he offered a lump. Some transfer, well above what state law would normally require in a property division. I declined again. Only attorneys across the table finally looked at me. Miss Bennett, what exactly are you asking for? I slid my own list across the table. Fair compensation for the career growth I'd given up during the marriage. My documented share of investment, returns from assets I'd helped manage, the portion of the retirement accounts that legally belonged to me, the principal I'd put into our first home before the marriage, and the money I'd taken from my personal savings to launch the flower shop. Every line had a number beside it. Every number had documentation. This, I said. Grant, read the list. That is all. That is what is mine. I can give you more. That is yours. The conference room went very quiet. I capped my pen. Taking what I am entitled to isn't greed. Taking whatever you throw at me because you feel guilty doesn't interest me. Grant's fingertips stopped against the table. Danielle, this isn't about guilt? Then what is it about? He looked at me. I don't know what else I can give you. I put the papers back into my bag, then sign. He didn't move right away. Every attorney in the room suddenly became fascinated by his or her own paperwork. Grant lowered his voice. What if I change? Good. His eyes lifted. What if I start handling things at home? What if I correct the record publicly? What if I... Grant. He stopped. You can start over. For one brief second, something lit in his eyes. I slipped the strap of my bag over my shoulder. Just not with me. That light went out. I walked to the door. No one called me back. Right before it closed, I heard the scratch of a pen against paper. One signature. Then another. He finally signed. The first weekend after the divorce was finalized, I slept until 10:30 in the morning. When I woke up, I lay there staring at the ceiling for 3 full minutes. No one knocked on the door. No one asked about breakfast. No one called my name from another room. I rolled over and slept another 40 minutes. By the time I reached the shop around noon, Daniel was sitting on the front steps drinking coffee. "Boss is late." "Boss approved it." "Who do I complain to?" "The owner of the inn next door. That is me." "Then your complaint has been denied." He handed me another cup. I took it. "No sugar." "That is what you drank last time." "You remembered." Daniel shrugged. "Was that supposed to be difficult?" My hand paused around the cup. He had already gotten up to move the flower stand by the door. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't waiting for praise. That afternoon, Ethan sent me a link. It was an interview with the foundation. The host brought up Whitmore family traditions, and almost casually mentioned the old scandal from 21 years earlier. Grant hadn't even answered yet when Ethan reached for the microphone. "That story needs to be corrected. On screen." He sat up straighter. Danielle Bennett did not leak anyone's private information. It was an internal failure at the foundation, and the Whitmore family let the wrong story stand for far too long. The host clearly hadn't expected that. "So would you say your family misunderstood her?" Ethan paused for 2 seconds. It was more than a misunderstanding. His fingers tapped once against his knee. "She raised me. I spent years refusing to acknowledge her as family." He looked directly at the camera. "That was my fault." I watched that far, then turned my phone face down on the counter. Daniel came in from the backyard. "Bad news?" "Number? Good news." "Not really." "So, news." I laughed. "Pretty much." After that, Noah came to see me about once a month. The first time, he showed up carrying a bag of white shirts he'd ruined in the laundry. "Mom." I looked inside. Every shirt was a strange pinkish gray. "You washed them with a red sock." "One sock. One is enough." "Can they be saved?" "Number, you always used to save them." "Then this is your chance to learn about irreversible loss." He stared at the shirts for 2 seconds, then laughed at himself. "Fair." He didn't leave the bag with me. That afternoon, he stayed in the shop and learned how to repot houseplants. He got soil all over the table. Before he left, he wiped the table down himself. I stood by the door and watched him tie the trash bag shut. He looked up. "What?" "Nothing. You want to tell me you are proud of me, don't you? Don't get carried away." He grinned and hugged me. This time, he asked first, too. Eleanor never came to the shop. She sent 3 letters. The first was long. The second was half as long. The third had only 2 sentences. "I used to believe keeping a family together was the most important thing. I understand now that if keeping it whole requires one person to disappear inside it, then all you've done is hide the cracks. I won't ask you to forgive me again." I put the letter in a drawer. I didn't reply. Meredith came to town once in a while. The first time, she spent 20 minutes choosing flowers, and ended up buying the most ordinary little pot of mint in the shop. "You drove 300 miles to buy mint. I have money. It costs $9. Proof that I am financially responsible." We both laughed. She never talked to me about Grant. I never asked. As for Grant, I rarely saw him. During the first year after the divorce, he came by 3 times. The first time, he stood outside the shop for 40 minutes and never came in. The second, he brought a revised public statement from the foundation. I told him to send it to my attorney. The third time was in winter. He stood outside the flower shop and watched Daniel and me carrying Christmas wreaths. Daniel asked if I wanted help. I said no. He said, "Okay," and then, incredibly, he actually stepped aside. I wrestled the heaviest wreath onto a display rack by myself, and almost smacked myself in the forehead with it. Daniel laughed so hard he had to grab the wall. I threw a small bundle of pine branches at him. Grant stood on the other side of the glass. He watched for a while, then he turned and walked away. That night, he sent his first personal message since the divorce. "You look happy." I didn't answer. In the second year, I rented the 2 empty rooms beside the flower shop and converted them into small guest rooms. In the third year, Daniel asked if I'd go out with him. I said no. He nodded. Okay. That caught me off guard. You are not going to ask why? You said no. That is it. What else would there be? I stood in the doorway looking at him. He smiled. Danielle, I like you. That doesn't make you responsible for giving me the answer I want. Then he went back next door to fix a broken window frame. 3 months later, I knocked on his door. That date you asked me about. Is the offer still open? Daniel looked down from the ladder he was standing on. I'd have to check my schedule. Never mind then. Wait. He climbed down so fast he nearly stepped into his toolbox. Turns out, I am suddenly free. I laughed so hard I had to hold on to the doorframe. A few years later, we decided to get married. The wedding was small. No family foundation. No reporters. No massive seating chart with dozens of tables. Noah was in charge of the music and arrived 3 hours early because he was nervous. Ethan came too. He stood in the doorway and asked, "Where am I sitting?" Noah pointed toward the second row. "Over there." Ethan looked at the first row. He didn't ask why he wasn't in it. Meredith wore a beautiful blue dress. When she saw me, she held up a mint candy. Descendant of the $9 plant. I laughed so hard I almost smeared my lipstick. 20 minutes before the ceremony, Noah came into the dressing room holding an envelope. Mom. I looked at him in the mirror. Who is it from? He didn't answer. I already knew. The letter was thick. I'd known Grant's handwriting for more than 20 years. I opened it. There wasn't a single line asking me to come back. He wrote about the first time he saw me, in a white blouse with coffee spilled down the front. He wrote that I never liked cake that was too sweet. He wrote that in winter, I curled my feet beneath the blankets before I fell asleep. He wrote that, when I was stressed, I lined everything on my desk into perfectly straight rows. He wrote that the day Noah was born, I still insisted on asking whether Ethan had eaten dinner. He wrote that he had spent years assuming all those small things would simply always be there. At the very end, there was one sentence. I finally learned how to see you, but only after you no longer needed me to. I finished the letter. Then I folded it back along the original creases. Noah watched me. Are you keeping it? I thought about it for 2 seconds. Then, I dropped it into the paper recycling bin beside the vanity. My phone rang right then. Grant. I answered. The other end was quiet. Danielle. Yeah. Did you read it? I did. His breathing slowed for a beat. I am not trying to ruin your wedding, I know. He was silent for a long time. If I'd known back then. I looked at myself in the mirror. Noah stood behind me, already dressed in his suit. Someone laughed outside the room. Daniel had probably said something ridiculous. I picked up one of my earrings. Grant. Yes, you did know. The line went completely silent. You knew what I did every day. You knew how Ethan treated me. You knew how your mother treated me. You knew I'd tried to explain what happened. I put on the first earring. You just believed I would stay, no matter what. His breathing became very quiet. Danielle, I am sorry. The wedding is about to start. I put on the other earring. Grant, you didn't lose me the day I left. I stood. My dress settled around me. You lost me every time I stayed, and you chose not to see me. He didn't say anything else. I ended the call. Noah came over and held out his hand. Ready. I placed my hand in his. Ready. The door opened. Sunlight poured in from outside. I stepped forward. This time, there was no countdown. Let's start with Grant Whitmore, a man so profoundly comfortable in his wife's invisible labor that he signed divorce papers and immediately asked about dessert. Not. Are you serious? Not. Can we talk about this? Dessert. That one sentence is a 20-year marriage in miniature. She handled everything. His schedule, his mother's tantrums, his son's passport, his brother's cufflinks, his career, his reputation, and the fraud accusation that should have destroyed her. And he genuinely believed her purpose was to make sure the lemon pie was on the second shelf when he got home. Grant didn't love Danielle. He loved the infrastructure she provided. And when that infrastructure walked out the door, he didn't grieve a partner. He grieved the loss of his unpaid life coordinator. He spent 20 years watching her work herself to exhaustion and never once asked if she was happy. He just assumed that because she stayed, she must be fine. That is not love. That is laziness dressed up in a wedding band. And Eleanor. God, Eleanor. The woman who framed her own daughter-in-law for corporate fraud to protect the family name, then spent 2 decades watching Danielle absorb the blame without saying a word. She didn't stay silent because she forgot. She stayed silent because Danielle's guilt was convenient. It kept Meredith's emails buried. It kept the Whitmore name clean. And it gave Eleanor a 20-year excuse to treat Danielle like hired help instead of family. Eleanor didn't protect the family. She protected the appearance of the family. And when the truth finally came out, she offered an apology, as if 2 sentences could undo 2 decades of weaponized silence. But this story isn't about them. It is about Danielle, who died alone in a hospital room in her first life while her husband attended a meeting. Her mother-in-law worried about dinner menus, and her son texted her asking where his passport was. She flatlined surrounded by people who loved what she did for them, but had never once asked who she actually was. And when she opened her eyes again 3 years earlier, she didn't waste a single second on denial or grief. She set a countdown. 1,095 days. 3 years to teach her son how to survive without her. 3 years to document every invisible task she performed. 3 years to prepare an exit so clean that by the time they noticed she was gone, there was nothing left to negotiate. She didn't scream. She didn't make a scene. She just quietly removed herself from every system. The grocery deliveries, the calendar reminders, the automatic payments, the packed luggage, the cufflinks in the second drawer, the medical appointments, the seating charts, the allergy lists. And when Grant finally came looking for her, she wasn't hiding, she was thriving, running a flower shop, fixing her own faucets, drinking coffee with a man who remembered how she took it without needing to be reminded 47 times. And when Grant finally found the proof that she'd been innocent all along, when he came to her with apologies and legal corrections, and offers of money and trusts and property, she said no, not because she was bitter, because she finally understood that the version of herself Grant wanted back wasn't a wife. It was a woman who would never ask him to choose her, never expect him to see her, and never stop making sure his life ran smoothly while hers disappeared. Here is what I need you to understand tonight. Loves. There are people in your life who will never appreciate you until you are gone, and even then, what they'll miss isn't you. It is the service you provided, the scheduling, the emotional labor, the silent absorption of every crisis they created. They'll call it love. They'll say they need you, but what they actually need is for you to keep making their lives easier while yours gets smaller and smaller and smaller until one day you wake up and realize you've spent 20 years as a supporting character in someone else's story. Danielle didn't just leave her marriage. She spent 3 years teaching everyone around her how to function without her, so that when she finally walked out, no one could claim she'd abandoned them. She made sure her son could find his own passport. She made sure the coffee machine had instructions. She made sure the house had systems. And then she left. Not in anger. Not in revenge. Just in clarity. And when Grant asked her what she wanted, do you know what she said? A divorce. Not an apology. Not money. Not a seat at the family trust table she'd been excluded from for 20 years. Just freedom. Because by then, she'd finally learned that the opposite of love isn't hate. It is indifference. And indifference is the most powerful weapon a woman has when she stops waiting for people to see her and starts building a life they'll never be invited into. The story's told. She came back from death, set a 3-year countdown, taught her family how to survive without her, divorced the man who never saw her, opened a flower shop, and married someone who remembered how she took her coffee. No explosions, no public meltdowns, just a quiet, methodical, devastatingly complete exit. Now, it is your turn. Are you ready to stop being the infrastructure in someone else's life and start being the architect of your own? I am Nova. Sweet dreams tonight and tomorrow. Rise from the ashes. Reborn.